A few years ago, there was a discussion in the donor circle on whether it is worth going in the field, and especially in more remote places, to check up on things and try to report from there. Because, well, in the current year, you can find out pretty much whatever you're interested in from the couch, right? From your desk, by searching online. Well, as it turns out, not only that is not the case, but first of all, you don't get local propaganda that good. But more importantly, is that the official institutions, especially the more multilateral ones and especially the more progressive ones, have become so disconnected from reality, and intentionally so, and so full of it, right? Have been distributing so many straight up lies, relying on the fact that people don't go to check for themselves. And by people, I also mean those who claim to be journalists. You don't hate journalists enough, by the way. Uh, these official institutions have gotten so bad that immediately, if you go in the opposite direction, like I did, and start going then checking things for yourself, you notice that no, it's not a small lie here or a small lie there. No, it's nearly everything is a lie. And thankfully, because I did go, have some evidence for it as well. Let's explore. Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Propaganda Basement, episode 6, and final on uh, Laotian propaganda, well, Southeast Asian propaganda. Then we'll move to another type of propaganda in the same season. Alright, this particular newspaper has a very interesting history. As you can see, it has these two holes. I got it straight up from the official archive of Vintin Times at their headquarters. The reason being that on that particular day, I was excessively busy and I just didn't have the time to buy it from the newspaper store. And since I went a few days later to their HQ, I'm like, okay, this one, the edition from November 23rd, is missing. Can I have it now? And they're like, oh, but we don't have, you usually send them back for melting or whatever. But because I bought so many, but she's like, okay, fine, you can have this one. So she just pulled it out from the official archive and gave it to me, right? If anyone wants to go and consult this, of course, I'm sure they do have the electronic version, but I'm not sure they have another printed version, because the printed version that should be forming the official archive is here on the other end of the world, from Lao. Anyway, so Vintin Times, November the 23rd, 2023. There you go. Prime Minister praises fruits of UNICEF support for children's rights. Does UNICEF have any merit to how children are being treated in Laos? No, of course not. It's all a grift. And the Prime Minister knows this as well. But because he gets personal benefits from playing with this charade, he won't mention it. It's really that simple. All right, some improvement in the relationship with Cambodia. Okay, I don't care about that. But there is something about Cambodia that, yeah, there you go. This one is a good example for what I mentioned in the intro. So, Cambodia's clean energy shift exceeds ASEAN goals. The use of clean energy in Cambodia's national grid has risen significantly, now constituting over 62% of total energy consumption, approximately 2,400 megawatts. The country also intends to export its energy production to regional nations, according to the Ministry of Mines and Energy. The minister made the remarks at the Mines and Energy Policy in Cambodia Forum on November the 21st, organized in collaboration with the Club of Cambodian Journalists. He stated that after nearly 3 decades of effort, the country has achieved the capability to supply electricity to almost every village nationwide. That's not exactly true. It definitely wasn't true in November 23. He said the country has made substantial contributions to reducing emissions from fossil fuels, yes, at the expense of everyone's standard of living, by utilizing clean, renewable energy sources, including solar, wind, and water. Yeah, solar and wind, that is to say, enriching CCP contractors. Ratanak noted that the nation's transition from fossil fuel to clean energy has garnered international recognition. Yes, of course, Westoid progressives and CCP shields were like, oh, there you go, there's some idiots over there who actually take this seriously. He highlighted the ASEAN principles mandate member countries to source 35% of their energy from clean, renewable sources by 2030. Cambodia has already surpassed that target, reaching over 60% in 2022. In the past, we relied on power generated from diesel or oil, actually, you still do, which produced heavy dark smoke and loud noise, still does in the middle of the capital city. However, by the end of 2022, 62% of our grid's electricity came from clean and renewable sources. This includes over 40% from our country's hydropower sources. Okay, that's legitimate. More than 10% from solar energy. I'm questioning that number. A small amount of biomass power and clean energy import from Laos. Our energy sector has already almost doubled the ASEAN average. Whatever. Okay. Meanwhile, in reality, this is footage from Phnom Penh from the exact same month as this article was published. And what you're seeing all over the place are generators. Why? Because stable electricity in the middle of the capital city is still a luxury good. It's very rare. Of course, it's better than in other places. I mean, if you compare it to Beirut, for instance, then Phnom Penh has a much more stable electricity supply. But if you compare it to, well, any city in Europe of comparable size, or really any city in Central Asia, or any city in China, then it is terrible. So, what really happened is the moving of pollution from central big coal-powered or diesel-powered supply to locally produced in big generators for a neighborhood or whatever. Regular people bought them for themselves and started using them. Especially businesses and entities that really do need a constant flow of electricity and can't just afford to shut things down just because potato, right? Because I like, because it's not a temporary crisis. This has been going on for more than a decade. When there was a sudden drop in electricity, I asked around, well, why is that? Has this been announced? I was curious. And they're like, no, it wasn't announced. They never announced. It's the government doing some BS once again. That was the common reaction from regular people in Phnom Penh, right? So everyone knows that this is the case. So everyone that has been living in Cambodia for more than a week, really, and definitely 100% of Cambodian citizens will be reading this and laughing out loud. But the point is not for Cambodians to read it or to believe it. The point is for their financiers, mostly in China and in the West, to read it and believe it so they can give more grifts to the local, I should call them at this point, robber barons and collaborators with evil, because all of this thing is, whether by design or by accident, doesn't really matter at this point. It is straight up evil because it basically intentionally lowers the standard of living of people for absolutely no gain whatsoever. I mean, oftentimes, not even, with the exception of the bureaucrats who get a lot of gibs, the energy operators are actually losing money on this crap. So almost everyone loses. So there's that. Alrighty. Let's move further. Industry Ministry, whenever South Korea strengthen Lao airport operations, yeah, that could be necessary, considering that you'd need some more of that. Platform for global modernization, yeah, right. And then you go, this is a nice one. Indian left-wing propaganda. Redefine progress to ensure a safer world, and it's straight up an anti-capitalist manifesto. Progress has been frequently understood to mean improvements in technology as well as material goods and services, making possible increased and wider access to comforts and luxuries. Progress has been frequently understood to mean improvements. Oh, there you go. It's written twice. Get an editor. On the basis of such an understanding, human society is considered to have progressed with great continuity for thousands of years, and such progress has been the greatest during the last 3 centuries or so. In any region, there may be temporary setbacks due to disasters and wars, but the forces of progress assert themselves again and again, and the path of progress is resumed. However, such understanding of progress runs against increasing evidence of greater human suffering and disasters over vast areas. Is there evidence for that? No, of course not. In fact, there's evidence to the contrary, but that doesn't stop this left-wing Indian from perorating. Let's read some more. In terms of technology and material comforts, the last 200 or 300 years are supposed to have seen the peak of human progress. Unfortunately, however, these years have also seen the peak of destruction caused by wars and weapons. Really, I mean, Genghis Khan killed proportionally more people than all of the wars in the last 300 years, but okay. This period has seen very destructive colonial and imperialist wars. Again, Genghis Khan was worse. Were also followed by famine and other man-made disasters, as the survival conditions had been badly disrupted by conflict and exploitation. You mean like Genghis Khan? Then there were 2 world wars with a short tension-ridden gap between them. More than 50 million people were killed directly or indirectly, and many more in the form of longer-term impacts, including serious injuries, disability. Okay. This was followed by massive destruction in Korea, Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, Palestine. I mean, just writing Palestine unironically tells me everything I need to know. Sudan, which one of them, by the way? Somalia, again, which one of them? Ethiopia, Rwanda, Congo, again, which one of them? And many other countries. Millions perished in the man-made disasters and the atrocities of the Soviet Union and China. Much earlier in the Australian and American continents, the arrival of European settlers led to the greatest civilization. Oh, no, sorry, no, such terrible genocides, really, that the majority of several indigenous communities perished within a few decades. Well, that tells me that there weren't genocides. I mean, a genocide actually lasts very little, not decades. Okay, whatever. This mass distress was caused by the forces supporting aggressive and violent pursuits of narrowly perceived self-interests. Well, really? Narrowly perceived? I mean, you write in English. I'm just saying. Authoritarianism, exploitation, and injustice. Yeah, right. And the injustice is that you're allowed to breathe, really. Why were such forces allowed to be so strong as to be able to go on and causing the death of millions of people and inflicting massive distress on even more people? I don't know. Ask Genghis Khan. If there has been a constant progress of humanity, then why such forces remain so destructive as to inflict massive ruin in one country after another? Why do poverty, hunger, and deprivation continue to exist on a big scale in the world if there has been real progress? Well, for starters, there's far less hunger. Now, deprivation is a very relativistic term, but hunger is a very objective term. And the incidence of hunger, that is to say absolute poverty, has really almost never been lower. In fact, it has gotten slightly worse since 2022, mostly because of you people, that'll be you, the progressives, and your pandemic project, for which I'm very glad that you're currently being punished, and I hope you're being punished even more. The supporters of the pandemic project deserve to have their lives made intentionally worse, but anyway, that's a tangent. These questions have been raised in the context of human progress. So you see this vagueness. The question has been raised. No, it's far leftists, most of them funded by either the CCP or some other obscure anti-civilizational interests, who they raise it in an attempt to promote an intentional anti-capitalist agenda. Now, of course, they don't call it that. They call it degrowth for the glory of Mother Gaia or whatever, saving the earth and whatnot, as if that is a question, a legitimate one anyway. However, if one looks at the impact of human activities and actions on other forms of life, yeah, poor bugs, then even bigger questions arise. No, they don't. In the centuries when humanity was supposed to be progressing, most wild animals, birds, insect, river, and sea life, as well as their habitats, were destroyed on a massive scale. Most? Really? How do you know that? How do you measure it? I mean, you don't have global data spanning prior to like 1970s, and even that And because it says the last 3 centuries. Really, how many species of bugs or whatever, how many species of wild animals have been negatively affected by progress in 1725? Well, the answer is who the hell knows? You don't know, because most of the world was not experiencing any progress in 1725. So there's that. Okay, where were we? All right, birds, insect, river, and sea life, as well as their habitats, were destroyed on a massive scale, in some contexts to such an extent that the rate of species getting extinct or endangered increased manifold. Compared to what? Right? I mean, do you have the rate of extinctions in 1725, so you can compare it with the one of today? No, of course not. But of course, they don't tell you that. Apart from the extreme pain and suffering caused to various forms of life due to the many-sided onslaught on them by human beings. Wah. What is worse, it is in this period of the supposed period of greatest human progress, as narrowly perceived, that the biggest threats to the basic life nurturing condition of our planet have appeared. Really? Then why the hell are we living longer and better? That by the way, includes the poorest parts of India as well, because this guy is Indian. These threats, in the form of nearly a dozen serious environmental problems led by climate change, as well as the accumulation of huge stocks of weapons of mass destruction — talk to your government, by the way, about that — have led to the unprecedented man-made possibility of terrible disruption of life-nurturing conditions, sparing no one, and leading to even greater suffering for coming generations. Really, the poor are greater suffering from coming generations for being able to survive till the age of 70 at a far higher rate than the generation born in 1970 or the generation born in 1925. Oh my goodness, the greater suffering. Cut the crap. In such conditions, it is difficult to speak of such continuing human progress leading to enhanced welfare. Instead, it is much more realistic to speak of a highly distorted understanding of progress leading to immense distress to humanity, as well as other forms of life, and the high likelihood of even more distress in the days of years to come if long overdue significant reforms continue to be neglected. Now, of course, they don't tell you here, or do they? As an integral part of such an agenda of change, let's see, it's important to have a very different understanding of progress, which in a true sense can be really consistent with the creation of a better and safer world. Now, I'm still curious on whether they go to tell me what that means. It's important to see progress more and more in terms of commitment to the basic precepts of justice, equality, peace, protection of environment. What does equality have to do with anything? Protection of environment and biodiversity, with special emphasis on ensuring the survival of our endangered planet. Really? Is our planet in danger? No, of course it's not. Thus, instead of considering progress as a taken for granted continuity with the passage of time, it must be seen to follow only if a lot of efforts are made for enhancing justice. Again, it basically repeats itself, but with slightly different words. Again, why does this matter? These efforts by an increasing number of people alone can lead to the kind of progress we need in the world. It is fallacious to go on speaking of more technological advances and more attractive consumer goods as necessarily being indicators of progress. Okay, that is true, and that's what makes this kind of insidious propaganda so effective. Instead of continuing to fall victim to such a narrow understanding which has done enough harm in the past, debatable, in future path of humanity should be led by much wider and enlightened understanding of progress based on justice, equality, peace, and protection of the environment to create a better, safer, and happier world. Well, actually, I don't want safety. Safetyism is degenerate. The author is Bharat Dogra, honorary convener, campaign to save Earth now. His recent books include Planet in Peril, Protecting Earth for Children, and A Day in 2071. So there you go. You have a very militant, far-left environmentalist telling you stuff. Now, to be fair, then that's why I said that there is something true here that makes this thing so insidious. Right? It is fallacious to go on speaking of more technological advances and more attractive consumer goods as necessarily being indicators of progress. Now, this is true, and it's one of the reasons why environmentalist propaganda works on certain people, although of course not everyone, but it works on so many people because it if framed this way, the way this Indian guy does, especially towards the end of the article. Now, of course, the editor of this newspaper hasn't been particularly smart to rearrange things to make it more attractive, but it doesn't matter. It relies it relies on, or it starts from something that most people, and this is especially true with younger people who don't have any point of reference, especially younger people who've never been poor, which is increasingly true with most young people, really, including in poor countries. Or poor young people in poor countries are significantly richer than I was when I was a kid, right? So a 10-year-old in 1989 in Eastern Europe was significantly poorer than most 10-year-olds today in most poor countries. That's how huge the difference is, right? So for those kinds of people, their baseline, their reference point is significantly higher than for those of us who have actually experienced real poverty. So they already start from a much higher baseline and from a much higher reference point. And as a result, for them, poverty is something different than what it really is objectively. And this makes them susceptible to all sorts of propaganda, including this one. And again, this sometimes works also because a significant portion of people also intrinsically feel that there is something rotten in the state of Denmark, right? Uh, what if normative materialism is kind of wrong? I mean, does the line always have to go up? And should it always go up? And it's a legitimate question. And unfortunately, the non left has allowed this question to be only addressed by environmentalist loons, but not by everyone else. And in doing so, now it makes it much harder to start discussing reforms because again, the author of this article that I just read is an environmentalist loon. But the question is not particularly wrong. I mean, is washing machines connected to Wi-Fi using 4 chips a good thing, progress in and of itself? I mean, what's wrong with a washing machine made in 2004 with same design? You make it in 2025, but same design. What's wrong with those that didn't use any chips or even just one microprocessor or even a cheaper one? And they were also themselves cheaper and more accessible, and they did the exact same task with the exact same um, precision, right? The same thing with other things, right? I mean, why do the TV sets have to have a video camera? And why do the TV sets have to take a peek into my bedroom, right? Why a lot of these things, right? So at some point, some of these questions have to be asked, and at some point it becomes a legitimate question that look, maybe some of the change and some of the so-called technological development is actually not good at all, and may even be straight up evil. And also maybe some so-called technological development is just a grift and it's useless at best and definitely not a sign of progress. But that's the thing, us as non-leftists have allowed, and it is mostly our fault really, we allowed these questions to be asked exclusively by the poverty worshippers, because that's really what environmentalists are, poverty worshippers. And in doing so, have rendered some of the necessary reforms and changes not impossible, but definitely harder to even conceptualize, let alone implement, because of course nobody wants to be regarded as a poverty worshiper. Of course, I'm not a poverty worshiper, but that's kind of the vibe you get when you start asking these kinds of questions. And again, some of them are legitimate, and that's why some of this environmentalist propaganda and pacifist nonsense has some traction, and not just in far left circles, because they do start from a very reasonable standpoint, and then of course they deviate immediately into environmentalist religion. But most people don't go all the way there. They're just like, yeah, well, you know what, there are some things that are kind of wasteful, And yeah, maybe, are we really sure it's progress? And also, when you combine that with certain emotions, because again, this kind of propaganda is not written for the general public. I mean, this one is in a Laotian newspaper, but it's written in English, and it's written mostly for a Westoid audience, right? All of the people who go to see the conservation efforts, go meet the elephants and things like that. Most of the people who go there are susceptible to these kinds of things because they don't go for politics. I mean, I think I'm the only visitor in Lao, at least for the year 2023, that went there for the politics of it. Most people don't go there for politics. So, the target audience is not necessarily people like us. But the point is, learn to recognize the propaganda. And just like the establishment should have taken immigration seriously and therefore you wouldn't have seen such a surge in quote unquote far right populism. The same thing, we as non leftists should take the concerns about normative materialism seriously so we don't see a surge in far left green populism 10 or 15 or 20 years down the line. It's not an immediate danger, but it may be many years down the line. Currently, no, they're done because of their grifting, but they'll be back, and they'll be back because in a generation, most people will have forgotten about this grifting and why the left now has been sent in remission. And the next, by 2045, 2050, there will be enough young people who will definitely not remember not even the 2020s, let alone the 1980s. And they will say the same thing. And again, at least some of the initial premise will not have been necessarily wrong. Anyway, throwback to season 4. There you go. Lao baseball team celebrates Asia Journalists Association Award. So, sports as propaganda, right? Do people like oh, American stuff? Okay, we'll give them American stuff, but with our people and with our ideological control. And get the journalists into the grift so they provide positive coverage. So as a result, nobody asks about the ideological risks that can come with people looking at baseball from the US, obviously. Vintin Times, November the 24th, 2023. This is a picture. I've shown you more footage from this. Maybe I should show even some more because I've been to that ceremony. Alrighty, so let's see if there is anything that should be covered from here. Oh yeah, of course it is. There we go. This is fascinating because it is not from India or China or it's Westoid. To save the climate, the oil and gas sector must slash planet warming operations, a report says. It has a Chinese format of propaganda, but at least in theory it's not. In practice it probably is. The oil and gas sector, one of the major emitters of planet warming gases, will need a rapid and substantial overhaul for the world to avoid even worse extreme weather events fueled by human-caused climate change, according to a report released on Thursday. The current investment of $800 billion a year in the oil and gas sector will need to be cut in half, and the greenhouse emissions which result from the burning of fossil fuel like oil will need to fall by 60% to give the world a fighting chance to meet its climate goals, the International Energy Agency said. Really? So the International Energy Agency is busy with intentionally, purposefully destroying the energy sector and making everyone poorer. Now you get it when I say that every single authority institution is just full of it, and it's just intentionally wrong at this point, right? So in the previous newspaper there was like, Cambodia has achieved and even surpassed the climate goals and whatever. In reality, everything is worse as a result of trying this left-wing version of doing things. Same thing had happened in Ecuador. We'll have plenty of time this season, especially from the next episode onward, to discuss Ecuador, but the same thing happened in Ecuador, right? The Rafael Correa, the previous president, tried really, really hard to be a left-winger on everything, neglected the oil and gas infrastructure, and lo and behold, now you have scheduled blackouts. And I have lived through them as well while in Ecuador. And a country that used to be a net exporter of energy now has to beg for a megawatt here, half a gigawatt there, just to keep the lights on, and oftentimes can't. Right. Same thing in Cambodia. It used to be a much bigger producer of energy. Now it still is, but it can't distribute it that well because of the green stuff. Laos at least has good enough places to produce hydro, so at least for now they've been kept sheltered from this insanity. But there you go. Soon enough they might have be in trouble unless I'm right and this grift is in fact over. All right. So the International Energy Agency says that you should cut the investment in half, and they will need to fall by 60% to give the world a fighting chance. Who the hell elected these people? And what does that even mean? Give the world a fighting chance. Fighting against what? Against normal things? Really? Against winter? Against summer? I mean, come on. Give me a break. I mean, the idea that you can change the weather by paying taxes is ridiculous. The IEA's report comes just ahead of the United Nations Climate Conference, or COP28, which begins next week. Yeah, I think this was in Azerbaijan. That worked out really well. No, it was in Dubai, sorry. Oil and gas companies, as well as other people and organizations connected to fossil fuels, often attend the meeting, drawing criticism from environmentalists and climate experts. Whenever I see climate experts, what I'm hearing is grifter, bad faith, evil person. That's really all I hear. But others say the sector needs to be at the table to discuss how to transition to cleaner energy. We don't need to transition into anything. You're all illegitimate, get lost. I mean, at some point, and this is one of the many reasons why I prefer, and I hope there will be more leaders like Trump who just show up and just say it like that. Because at some point, this whole thing, but we try the diplomatic method, and it just doesn't work that well. It works kinda, but generally, what works even better is like, no, we don't have to discuss about this. No, this is illegitimate. You are illegitimate. Get the fuck out. Because at some point we really need that. We need some honesty back into multilateral. I mean, if multilateralism is to survive as a format, we really need some honesty back into discussion. People like Millet, right? Who just go, no, all of this is illegitimate. It's socialism. It creates poverty. You just need to go. No, because no, fuck you, right? Because seriously, I mean, this kind of hysterical nonsense, and it goes to show that, right? Well, even though it was published by the Associated Press, nobody in the West dared to take it. You can't. I mean, I looked for it. I haven't been able to find it. Maybe you find it and show me in the comments. But it hasn't been reprinted by the New York Times or by the BBC or by even the very left wing news outlets in the West thought that this is a bit too extreme and the framing is just so unbelievably unpopular. And again, this was during Biden's time, right? November 2023. That was the time when the progressives thought that getting re-election would be a non-issue, and of course it's going to happen. It was before some of the shocks that the far left has had to go through during 2024 and early 2025. Right. The energy sector is responsible for over 2/3 of all human activity-related greenhouse gas emissions. How do you know that? And who cares? And oil and gas is responsible for about half of those, according to, okay, I don't care. Oil and gas companies are also responsible for over 60% of methane emissions. Really? Volcanoes? Anyone? No? Okay. A gas that traps about 87 times more heat than carbon dioxide on a 20-year timescale. Again, who cares? Even if that's true, but it's not. I mean, again, volcanoes. Just one tiny little volcano in Iceland farting a little bit emits more methane than the entirety of oil and gas, global oil and gas industry for several decades. I mean, that's really the scale we're discussing about. So, climate change is a natural phenomenon and will continue to happen whether you pay taxes to save Mother Gaia or not. Both clean hydrogen made from renewable electricity and carbon capture, which takes carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere, are currently untested at scale, and they will remain untested because they're expensive. The report looked at climate promises made by countries as well as the scenario where the world had reached net zero emissions by 2050. It found that if countries deliver on all climate pledges, demand for oil and gas will be 45% lower than today's level by 2050. Strong doubt. If the world reaches net zero by then, demand would be down 75%, it said. No, I'm team drill, baby, drill. Let's increase the demand. Screw these people. At some point, someone will have to say it in public. Screw these people. It's like, no, because no. We'll just assume you're all wrong because you are all wrong, and that's it, right? At some point, we'll have to do that. Anyway, one more time, uh, the opinion page of the Vintin Times where the regime tests its ideas. Well, this time around, the regime tests a Westoid idea. What should we do today to ensure gender equality in the future? Again, this is in Lao. To mark the annual 16 days of activism against gender-based violence, this year's UN global theme focuses on efforts to stop violence against women and girls. Really, so the least likely demographic to be the victim of violence gets a 16 days of activism. At what point do we start doing what needs to be done, which is the UN should have its right to exist questioned? I mean, seriously, at what point do we do that? I mean, you know, the pandemic project has made it fashionable to get countries out of the World Health Organization. Good. We still act as if these structures, like the World Health Organization, is like a secular, centuries-old tradition and whatnot. I mean, how dare you get out of the World Health Organization? Really, as late as 2003, more than 90% of the planet was not member of the World Health Organization. It's a very new thing, right? It's not a tradition. It's not even a post-World War II thing. No, it's more like a post-9/11 thing. It's a very new thing. Same thing with this whole UN gender equality thingy. Most of the UN women, and the very existence of UN women should bring alarm bells to most people. But most of their programs, even their quote-unquote traditional ones, are younger than 30, younger than 25. It's a very new thing. Why exactly do we have so much compunction about just saying, okay, why do these things even have to exist? Anyway, the government of Laos is working to promote gender equality by encouraging women to participate in all areas of life, promoting women's rights and speaking out against the violence inflicted upon women and girls. Vintin Times asked women how they felt their role in life could be strengthened, and you couldn't have a less representative pool of women, less representative for the Laosian society. Like, for instance, where it is. There you go. Mrs. Whatever, student of the National University of Laos. Unfortunately, many women still have the mindset that channels them into thinking they will continue to stay with their parents, get married, and have children instead of wanting to further their education because they have been taught this repeatedly. But without an education and lacking information, they're limited and are unlikely to think differently. How's that a bad thing? I encourage every family and organization to do more to support women. Okay, meanwhile, in reality, less than 3% of the total population of Laos is interested in higher education. Interested, right? That's one aspect. Second aspect, more than 90% of women do have children, and this is not significantly higher than the rest of the world, really. And more than 80% do have two children or more in Laos, which is more rare than, generally speaking, than in the rest of the world. So so clearly, what this lady is saying is unrepresentative for. Oh, they don't show her picture. Maybe she has blue hair or something. That's why they don't. They give picture to all of the others, but not this one. But what this individual is saying is completely unrepresentative, and this is a very crude style of propaganda. I suppose, again, I met the people who write these things. They're slightly older, so I suppose they're not accustomed to writing feminist propaganda because they're probably not feminists themselves. But if the order came, like we say, or at least used to say back in communist times, if there is an order, then with our pleasure, right? So I suppose they wrote it because, well, that's what the order says. But it can't be more self-evident that this is an intentional attempt at seeing what the quote-unquote educated bubble in Vintin thinks about. And at least from the stats that I got to look at, it doesn't particularly seem to work. But hey, maybe it will work in 20 years or whatever. But at some point, these kinds of things will have to start being treated as not just as silly propaganda things. No, just treat them with contempt and open hostility right from the get-go. You said gender equality, the door is that way. That's it. No more debate. At some point, we have to stop debating these things, really, and start treating them as what they are, which is anti-civilizational, foreign-funded evil ideas and evil campaign. And you don't negotiate. Let's borrow a page from George W. Bush, right? We don't negotiate with terrorists because that's really what these people are. Most of them are straight up terrorists because their intention is to lower your population. That's really what it is. I mean, and the Laotians know this all too well. Oh yeah, one more thing. Remember in the fourth season I mentioned something about football as a tool of propaganda. There you go. Generally speaking, the sports section is about local sports, but now suddenly it's about how Uzbekistan beat England. Why? Because it's a very good propaganda point. And Lao has started organizing a first division of women's football league, which is an attempt to expand not just the popularity of the sport, but the popularity of the state within various communities. And it's also in itself a feminist goal, which is, of course, a terrible development for Lao PDR. But while we cannot change what happens in Lao PDR, and nor should we try, I mean, who cares? It's a good reminder that some of these terrible ideas can be defeated in your community, in your country, and you should try to do that, because if you don't, then there be dragons, and you already live with some of the results. And if you're serious that you don't like them, you better start doing something about them. All right, that will be pretty much it with Southeast Asian propaganda. In the next episode, we're gonna start with propaganda from Latin America. I think the first one is from Ecuador. We'll move basically on the other extreme of the global south, and you will see that the propaganda there has very little in common, with one exception. Environmentalism appears quite a lot in Latin American propaganda as well, but also, admittedly, it also doesn't help that I went there around the same period, and one of these COP 20 whatever environmentalist summits was being held in Colombia while I was there. So as a result, it got a disproportionate amount of attention, much more than it should have and it would have otherwise. But I'll show you when I get there. The framing there is a bit more geopolitical and a lot less naive, which goes to show that contrary to the framing that there is such thing as the unified global south, you'll notice that it's very different, to the point that it's self-contradictory, because, well, in reality there is no global south. But anyway, the broader point notwithstanding, in the next episodes in this season, we'll continue to analyze propaganda for you. And if you like these kinds of things, don't forget to subscribe, and please do consider becoming a member. Join us at members.thefreedomalternative.com. because otherwise none of this would be possible without your support. And with all of that being said, thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all soon on the Freedom Alternative. Cheers!